The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, diamonds flashing on gowns, and the sound of laughter that felt more like knives. At the center of it all stood a billionaire, tall, arrogant, untouchable, his arm draped around a woman he barely looked at anymore. She was his wife, fragile, slender, the very woman who had once given him her heart and her youth. But to him, she was nothing more than a shadow. He mocked her with every careless word, calling her weak, too skinny, a ghost in his golden empire. The world laughed with him, but behind her trembling smile, her heart was shattering. That night, she promised herself one thing. One day he would regret underestimating her. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, because this story is not just about betrayal. It's about transformation, revenge, and the rise of a woman the world thought was broken. The mansion was silent at night, but silence in that house was never peace. It was the silence of a battlefield after cannons had stopped firing. Elena would walk barefoot through the marble halls, her frame ghost-like under the dim lights, clutching a robe around her body as though to shield herself from the emptiness. Her husband was never home, and when he was never really there. Adrian thrived in crowds, in boardrooms, in places where men in tailored suits raised glasses to celebrate their victories. But when it came to her, his words were no champagne, they were knives. One evening, the two of them arrived at a fundraiser. Cameras flashed, lights exploded, and Adrian's hand rested on her shoulder, but not with affection, with possession, as if she were part of his wealth, an accessory like the watch on his wrist. A guest approached, admiring her gown, saying softly, "She looks like a painting." Adrian smirked, sipping his drink. Yes, but a painting too fragile to hang. One gust of wind, and she too a tear. Laughter erupted around them. Elena smiled, her lips curved because she had been trained to. But inside, she was breaking again. Later that night, as the chauffeur drove them home, Adrian loosened his tie and leaned back, careless and smug. "You should eat more, Elena. People are starting to ask if I starve you. It steps embarrassing." Her voice barely escaped her throat. "I do eat, Adrian." He laughed, cold, dismissive. Does it count?" She turned her face to the window, hiding the single tear that slipped down her cheek. Outside, the city glittered, alive. But to her it was all blurred, a world she could see but never touch. Every morning began the same way. Adrian at the gym, sculpting his body to perfection. Trainers surrounding him, admiration feeding his ego. Elena at the breakfast table, untouched food before her, her appetite smothered by words that played like echoes in her head. Fragile, weak, pathetic. Sometimes she would force herself to take another bite, as though each mouthful was not just food but a defiance, a silent rebellion he could never hear. One afternoon, when he returned home early, he found her in the library, lost in a book of poetry. He plucked it from her hands with a sneer. "Still wasting your time with this nonsense. Words don't build empires. Elena, power does. You wouldn't understand." Her lips parted, but no words came, because he was right. She didn't understand his kind of power. She didn't understand how someone could destroy with laughter, how someone could starve a soul while feeding the world. But Adrian made a mistake that day. He believed her silence meant surrender. He believed her fragility meant weakness. What he never realized was that silence can be sharper than screams. It hides storms that wait for the right moment to strike. And Elena, though frail in body, carried a storm inside her chest. The betrayal didn't come like thunder. It came quietly, like a whisper that seeps under the door, a poison that spreads before you even know it's there. One night, Adrian hosted a gala at their estate. The chandeliers glittered, the champagne flowed, the guests wore diamonds like armor. Elena, in her pale silver gown, stood by his side like a statue. She had learned how to wear silence as if it were jewelry, how to smile while drowning. But that night she saw something she wasn't supposed to see. Across the room, Adrian leaned close to a young woman in red, his hand brushing against her arm, his voice lowered, his smile genuine, in a way it never was with her. The woman laughed, her eyes shining, and Adrian touched her waist as though Elena had ceased to exist. A glass slipped from Elena's hand. The sound shattered against the marble floor. Heads turned. Adrian looked back, his expression not of guilt but of annoyance, as though her broken heart had inconvenienced his evening. Later, in the car, the silence between them was suffocating. He finally spoke, his words sharp as glass. "You embarrassed me tonight." Her voice trembled. "I embarrassed you. While you touched her like I wasn't steak even there." He smirked, not even denying it. "At least she doesn't steak look like she still collapse if the wind blows. Maybe try being a woman, Elena, instead of a shadow." Her chest burned, her breath faltered. She stared at him, searching for the man she once thought she loved, but all she saw was cruelty wrapped in a tailored suit. The days that followed were worse. The whispers in the mansion, the maids exchanging looks, the hushed gossip that traveled faster than footsteps. She heard them once, outside her door. "Poor Mrs. Grant. The master doesn't even hide it anymore. This too weak to fight back. That step's why he chose her." Each word was a dagger, but the deepest cut came one evening, when Adrian didn't come home at all. At dawn, she found a message on his desk, a carelessly dropped note with the young woman's name scrawled in his handwriting. Her knees buckled. She clutched the paper like it was a blade piercing her palm. That morning, she confronted him. He was in his study, leaning back in his leather chair, sipping whiskey as though he had no care in the world. "Adrian," she whispered, holding the note. "How long has this been going on?" He didn't even glance at the paper. He just laughed. "Shits, does it matter? You always do. Too fragile to survive without me." Her hand trembled. For the first time, her eyes burned not with tears, but with fire. "You think I need you?" He stood, towering over her, his voice low and venomous. "You do. Because without me, you stare nothing. You stare weak, Elena. A brittle doll, and no one loves a doll once it cracks." He left the room, his footsteps echoing like war drums, leaving her standing there, her body shaking, her soul bleeding. But in that breaking, something shifted. Betrayal didn't kill her. It awakened her. Because love can be shattered, hearts can be torn, but humiliation has a way of forging steel in silence. And in that silence, Elena made a vow. One day, Adrian Grant would regret every word, every laugh, every scar he carved into her spirit. Not by her tears, not by her surrender, but by her transformation. The night after Adrian's betrayal, Elena sat alone in her room, staring at her reflection. Her face looked pale, her frame fragile, her eyes swollen from tears. She barely recognized herself. For years, she had believed Adrian's words, that she was weak, too skinny, too breakable to stand on her own. But in that silence, she realized something powerful. She wasn't weak because she was thin. She was weak because she had surrendered her worth to him. Her mother Sep's voice echoed from a memory long buried. "Elena, strength isn't sept in your body, it's sept in your will. Never let anyone tell you that you sept small." That night, Elena decided she would never again be the shadow in Adrian's story. She would become the storm in her own. Her transformation began quietly, away from the glittering parties and the cruel whispers of the mansion. She woke up before dawn and slipped into the gym Adrian rarely used. At first, her body trembled under the weight of the smallest dumbbells. Her arms shook, her legs wobbled, sweat stung her eyes. She heard his voice in her head, mocking, "You'll collapse if the wind blows." Each rep was her answer. Each drop of sweat was rebellion. She hired a trainer in secret, paying from the small allowance she had hidden away. "I don't want to just gain weight," she told him. Her voice was soft but steady. "I want strength. Real strength. I want to build myself from nothing." The trainer looked at her, frail, trembling, but with fire in her eyes, and nodded. "Then we start today." The weeks turned into months. Elena's body began to change, slowly but surely. Muscle formed where fragility once lived. Her shoulders broadened. Her arms grew lean and defined. Her posture straightened with confidence. For the first time in years, when she looked into the mirror, she didn't see a brittle doll. She saw a woman being rebuilt from ashes. But the transformation wasn't just physical. She began studying. While Adrian drank and entertained his affairs, Elena pored over books, finance, leadership, strategy. She sat in the library late into the night, taking notes, whispering to herself, "Knowledge is power, and power is freedom." She started speaking less and listening more at Adrian's business dinners. When he mocked her in front of others, "Don't mind Elena. She barely eats, let alone speaks." She smiled quietly, storing away every detail of the deals he bragged about. She was learning his empire from the inside out. The staff noticed first. The timid, breakable Mrs. Grant, who once hid from the world, was now walking the halls with steady steps. Her chin lifted, her presence commanding in a way that no jewels could buy. One maid whispered to another, "Have you seen her? She's different, stronger, like she knows something we don't." Even the trainer, months later, stared in awe as she completed a grueling set without flinching. "Elena," he said, breathless, "you stay for not the same woman who walked in here." She wiped the sweat from her brow, her eyes burning with quiet determination. "No," she whispered, "that woman is gone." Adrian, wrapped up in his arrogance, barely noticed. To him, she was still the fragile wife he could mock and dismiss. He didn't see the storm gathering right under his roof. And maybe that was the sweetest part of her transformation. He had no idea what was coming. Because Elena wasn't just rebuilding herself, she was preparing. Preparing for the moment when the tables would turn. Preparing for the day when Adrian Grant would choke on every cruel word he had ever thrown at her. Preparing for her rise. A rise he would never see coming until it was too late. The day finally came. The gala. The one where Victor would once again stand tall, showing off his empire, his money, his new ventures. But what he didn't know was that tonight, the spotlight wouldn't shine on him. It would shine on Ilara. The hall glittered with chandeliers, champagne glasses clinking, and the sound of hollow laughter echoing across the marble floors. Men in tailored suits and women in gowns brushed shoulders, whispering stories of power and betrayal. And in that very moment, the doors opened. Ilara walked in. No longer the weak, fragile woman Victor had mocked. No longer the wife who hid behind his shadow. She was radiant. Her presence silenced the room. Her gown shimmered like liquid gold. Her posture strong. Her eyes sharp with quiet fire. Every step she took was a declaration. "I have returned. And I am not the same." Victor's smirk faltered the instant he saw her. His glass nearly slipped from his hand. The whispers grew. "Is that Ilara? She looks magnificent. My God, she seems transformed." For years he had laughed at her weakness, told her she was nothing, ridiculed her in front of his friends. But tonight, the tables turned. Tonight, the world saw the truth, not of Victor's wealth, but of Ilara's strength. On the stage, the host announced the highlight of the evening. "A very special guest has transformed lives through her foundation, empowering women who were once broken to rise again. Please welcome, Ilara." The crowd erupted. Applause thundered across the hall as Ilara took the stage. Victor's face turned pale. Ilara spoke, her voice steady yet piercing. "There was a time," she began, "when I was told I was weak, that I was a burden, that my worth was nothing. I believed those lies for too long. But then I realized, weakness is not in the body, it is in giving up. And I did not give up. I rose." She looked directly at Victor, her gaze unflinching. The crowd followed her eyes, and suddenly, everyone knew who the villain in her story was. Victor shifted uncomfortably, sweat beading his forehead. The very people who once praised him now stared with disdain. His empire of respect crumbled in a single night. The applause roared. But Ilara wasn't done. "To every woman here tonight, to everyone who has been mocked, silenced, or belittled, hear me. Your pain does not define you. Your scars are proof of your survival. Rise, reclaim your story, and let the world regret ever doubting you." The audience rose to their feet. A standing ovation shook the room. Tears rolled down faces. Alara didn't just win back her dignity. She gave countless others the courage to stand too. Victor left the gala that night a broken man. His pride shattered, his arrogance exposed, and Alara, she left with her head high, her heart free, and her soul unchained. Family, what would you do if the very person who promised to love you became the one who mocked you? Would you break, or would you rise like Alara? Comment below. And never forget, betrayal can break you, but it can also make you unstoppable. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more stories like this are waiting for you.